In taking care of you, we recognize that you come to work and then being told you have to stay extra hours is a hardship. You have families. You have things that matter in your life that you want to get back to.
The new report studied about 900 officers from 2019 through 2021. It also recommends the NYPD make policies to address fatigue and train officers on how to recognize and mitigate fatigue.
It's important, I think, that officers, be sufficiently rested to do their jobs as well as they can.
The Police Benevolent Association responded to the report saying the NYPD relies on overtime because they don't have enough officers. Mayor Adams sent us a statement saying responsible overtime is necessary given the city's public safety challenges, but he's focused on making sure overtime does not affect officer performance. In Midtown, Tim McNicholas, CBS 2 News.
And again, that was in 2023 that came out. So, I mean, look at the ramifications. They're talking about after doing 4 hours of overtime. 4 hours. Wow. What officers are doing 4 hours of overtime these days? Who's doing 4 hours of overtime? And after 4 hours of overtime, of those 900 officers, right, 18% more likely to suffer a work-related injury on your next tour, 20% likely to have an incident of increased use of force because, they're not well rested, they're agitated, whatever the case may be, and a 36% increase to be subjected to a substantiated misconduct allegation. That one, personally, I think may have to do with the time frame of their review going through the summer of 2020, because they did this from 2019 to 2021. So you had the Summer of Love with all the different protests. And so I think a lot of the substantiated allegations may intertwine into that. But I'm sure that you're using, you're 20% more likely to, be involved in the use of force. So you're going to have higher allegations against you. But what I find really interesting is that they talked about it. Well, the officers have to be well rested, and that these things aren't. We appreciate you. The NYPD says we appreciate it. We'll take a look at it. But the 12-hour tours was supposed to, in the pilot program, right, was supposed to help by having 60 less appearances for the year. That's not the case. That's not the case. Like Patrick says, they're only your extra days off are only beneficial if they aren't ordered in for mandatory RDO overtime. And everybody's being mandated for all of this overtime. So, I mean, there's so many different facets that the overtime constraints, the overtime issues are causing, that is causing, like we said when we named this episode, the chaos in the NYPD. When you hear about the overtime, and again, let's touch on it. Let's not avoid the subject of overtime abuse by executives and their staff at 1PP.
Listen, so the extra 60 days, I think you're going to be sleeping most of those days, right? Because you're exhausted from working. So really, you're just catching up on the sleep that you missed. I'll give you an idea. How about this? How about the cops when they make an arrest, like in some other law enforcement municipalities, bring the prisoner, give it to the squad. Let's hire more detectives. Let's get more detectives in the squad. Let's get arrest processing detectives so that they can do debriefs. They can interrogate the prisoners, do a thorough investigation. But when a summary arrest is made out on the street, let the cops bring the prisoner in, sign a quick little affidavit on what their observation were, and then go back out. Then you're not losing cops on the street, right? You're not losing that. And then that 10-hour tour, that doesn't turn into, 15 or 16 hours because now you got to go see the DA or wait for video booking. I mean, look at the disparity number there. 2,000 less detectives. I say let's pump up the detective rank. And let's reshape this whole organization so that cops can get back out on the street and do their job. Don't have to worry about transportation of prisoners. They don't have to worry about the sitting there waiting to talk to the DA. and get them out. And then at the end of their 10 hours or their 12 hours, they go home, right? Let's stop with the mandatory. I mean, this is a problem, a systemic problem that has happened, starting, I believe, in, way back when, 2020 or whatever, but it's continually progressing. Everybody's talked about it. Everybody said, this is a new plan. Guess what? Nothing's working. We keep talking about the same crap over and over again. Somebody's got to step up and deal with it. You can do all the DOI, like I think Tom, I think Pat mentioned it. Like, what are they doing? Why are they even investigating that? Like, how is that an investigation? This study, it doesn't match their memorandum of understanding, right? How do they even get involved in that? And that's fine. You could do 1,000 studies, and what happens? You don't do crap about it. It's not going to fix the problem. And so what do they do? Put them on overtime. Put them on overtime. Bring them in. Bring them in. They beat the crap out of these poor cops. It's sinful. And now because of the bullshit that goes on up on the 14th floor, or actually that the chief of department's on the 13th floor, they're pulling the rug out from underneath them now, right? Oh, you can't have overtime. It's corrupt. It's corrupt. Yeah. Where was it corrupt? Up there on the 13th floor.
All right, we got Angry Rob out here today.
I'm sorry. I want to help I want to help the department. I want to help the cops,
No, I agree with you. And I think, given our executive perspective on this, it's something that's been talked about. It's been talked about on John and Eric's show. It's been talked about on Sal's show. The overtime issue is touching everything. And like you said, where was the abuse? Listen, there's some abuse at the lower command level, but where was the absolute abuse? The absolute abuse was up, like you said, up on the 13th floor. And inside of both the chief of department and the chief of patrol, who's now the chief of department, inside their office, you had the most egregious abuses where hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of overtime were given, where they were making over $100,000 in overtime, some of them more than doubling their salary in overtime. And like you said, then you had the knee-jerk reaction. We're going to pull the rug out of the overtime where it's actually needed, programmatic overtime where it's actually needed in the streets to address the crime is where it's going to be affected. So you have the abuse isn't being addressed properly, and the response to that abuse makes no sense. We're going to shut down overtime. Okay, so now what are you doing? When you're shutting down overtime, more people are going to leave. Like we talk about it, where overtime is always cyclical. It's always they're gonna pull it, they're gonna stop it, it's gonna start again. Mm-hmm. The warm weather's coming. Overtime is coming back. Even though they're limiting overtime now. But it got so bad with the overtime and the forced overtime on the officers that it was unsustainable. It was unsustainable for officers where they had no home life balance, like you said. They have no home. There's people that are leaving. They're leaving.
It's the same. Like Terry, I think is it Murrain? I think he's mentioned, like, where is the first steps oversight, right? But there is oversight. I think when Samara Cohen talks about it, there's an ICO, right? There's people in the precinct that assist an ICO. They're looking at every slip. There is mechanism to control overtime, but when you mandate it and you drum it down and say you got to do it, and they're backfilling vacancies of police officers. That's what they're doing. They're filling vacancies right there, and they're giving cops overtime. Okay, but they're not correcting the problem. The problem is the personnel issue. It's not drumming overtime, and then excessive overtime leads to sometimes abuses or whatever. But there is a system in place And it's worked. When you were the CEO of your precincts, when I was the XO of ESU, I watched my overtime. I knew I had my ICO worked. We all worked together. We watched it. There's definitely mechanisms. And now all of a sudden, Tish is coming up with this whole nother, mechanism of new type of monitoring and everything else. It's convoluted. Also, everything's in the department city, was it city time? You can pull that stuff. When a slip is submitted, you can pull people's city time information and get live information about how much overtime they have. But I think because of what happened up on the 13th floor, what happened with the previous police commissioner, it was just hit. They were just shelling out money. Do whatever you got to do. When the top lets everything go and just do what you want to do, then like we talked earlier, right? We talked earlier about the leadership. If the leadership isn't doing it and there's not understanding what's going on, if they're running amok, how do the poor guys on the street, right? It's gonna be, hey, I need some. When you were CEO and you needed somebody for overtime, and there was only everybody was gone, but the one guy had extra hours. You're like, yo, you got to stay. That's it. I'm sorry. You're going to be there. I'm going to go over the cap. Inspector, I'm going to go over the cap. Listen, right now, I don't give a, because I need a body and you're going to stay, right? So they're forced their hands.
Yeah, you kind of got ahead of me, and
Sorry.
yeah, no, that's all right. It's all right. Listen, this is, it's a conversation, so we never know. But yeah, it's true. So yeah, Commissioner Tish did say that she was going to implement these new changes, and they were making big changes to curtail excessive overtime.
Right.
And so let's see what she has to say with this.
Mm-hmm.
PD is making major changes after department overtime reached its highest yearly total ever. Now, these funds are under increased scrutiny as an ex-chief is investigated for allegedly trading sex for overtime.
You've just watched a clip from our latest live episode. Click the description to watch the full episode. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this.